the shadow entity of the forest. It was a gray afternoon, one of those days when the sun seems to fight its way through the clouds, but never quite manages to break free. I decided to take a walk through the forest that surrounded my grandparents' old cabin. I had grown up exploring those trails, enjoying the solitude that only the forest could offer. The crunch of leaves underfoot and the whisper of the wind through the branches had always been comforting. But that afternoon, something felt different. As I ventured deeper into the forest, the atmosphere grew thicker. The air felt heavier, as if an invisible pressure was hanging over me. I looked around, but the trees seemed darker than usual, the shadows deeper. I wasn't scared, though. I continued walking, as I always did, thinking it was just a passing feeling. At first, all I could hear was the sound of my steps and the distant calls of birds. But soon, the silence began to take over everything. A silence that wasn't natural. The wind stopped, the birds stopped singing, and the sound of the nearby streams disappeared. It was an absolute void, one that didn't feel comforting but rather oppressive. As I turned along the trail, I stumbled upon something I didn't remember from my previous walks. A clearing in the middle of the forest. It wasn't large, but there was something strange about it. The sunlight barely penetrated through the branches, and the air grew cold as though the very place was absorbing the warmth around it. I decided to step in, but just before crossing the threshold of the clearing, I felt a presence. Something or someone was watching me from the shadows. I looked toward the trees, but saw nothing. There was no movement, no creature in sight. Yet, something told me I shouldn't continue, that I should turn back and return home. The impulse to flee was strong, but my curiosity won out. I stepped into the clearing. Suddenly, a chill ran through my body. I felt a pressure in my chest, as though the air had become thicker. That's when I saw it. Not immediately, but vaguely, like a shadow slipping between the trees. It wasn't human, but something that resembled a humanoid form. Its shape was dark, indistinct, with edges that seemed to dissolve into nothingness. It had no face, only a silhouette that faded into forest shadows. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. I was paralyzed, unable to look away from the figure. I didn't know if I was dreaming or if what I was seeing was real, but my body responded to the fear. The figure began to approach slowly. Each step it took seemed absorbed by the moss-covered ground, as if it were walking on air. Finally, the entity stood before me. Its presence was more than terrifying. It was ancient, as if it were connected to the very heart of the forest, as if the forest itself had created it and sustained it. Though it had no face, I could feel its eyes on me, seeing something deep within me. Then, the figure raised a hand, or what seemed like a hand, and pointed toward the depths of the clearing, where the darkness was even thicker. A low, grave whisper emanated from it, resonating not only in my ears but deeper than my mind. "You shouldn't be here." The voice was not human, but something much older, as if it spoke from the very roots of the trees. "This forest is mine. You have disturbed it." In that moment, an indescribable fear took hold of me. Its voice not only spoke to me, but it seemed to pull me toward the darkness that had formed around it. The air turned colder, as if a chill wind came from the very earth itself, and the ground beneath my feet began to tremble. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My lungs seemed unable to breathe, and the shadow before me grew, expanding to fill the entire clearing. The branches of the trees began to twist, as though they were reaching out to grab me. My mind went into panic. The entity took another step forward, its silhouette fading momentarily into the shadows, but its presence remained like a weight on my chest. "Leave before I claim you." The last whisper echoed in my mind, and in that instant, I was able to move. Without thinking, I turned and ran as fast as I could, not daring to look back. The forest, which had once welcomed me, now seemed like a dark labyrinth. The branches seemed to strike at me. The ground shook beneath my feet, and the air grew denser with each step I took. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I reached the edge of the forest, where the sunlight finally illuminated the path toward the house. When I glanced back, I saw something that froze my blood. Between the trees, a shadow loomed, watching me. But it was no longer the figure itself, only a dark distortion of the forest, a presence that followed me, waiting. I returned to the house, and that night, as I tried to sleep, I heard whispers in the wind. But they were not comforting words, nor the familiar murmur of nature. It was a low whisper, as if the forest itself were calling me, claiming what I had invaded. I never returned to the forest, and although years have passed, I still hear those whispers sometimes, like a distant echo in my mind. And I know that somewhere among the trees, the entity still waits, waiting for someone else to cross its threshold.